afternoon to all participants. I would like to open SISMO seminar number 5 for the academic year of 2023, conducted on 5th February 2024. I'm Ada Tagar-Cohen, a professor of Jewish Studies at the Faculty of Theology at Dr University. And for the last 5 years, I acted as the director of Jena Center, and I'm very glad to conduct this seminar today. Our seminar is part of the academic agreement between Jena and Jena Center for Reconciliation Studies of the Friedrich-Schiller-University at Jena in Germany. And it will include 2 esteemed colleagues, Professor Dr. Martin Leiner and Dr. Laura Villanueva. Both of them belong to the Jena Center for Reconciliation Studies, which was founded in 2013 and has since conducted large academic and social activities in relation to reconciliation. The theme of our seminar will directly relate to one of the painful conflicts in the Middle East today between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It will show the results of long research done by scholars in the field of reconciliation at the Jena Center, with a special look at an important project that brings together in Japan Israeli and Palestinian women to try and reach mutual understanding and contacts. The seminar will be divided between the 2 scholars as follows. We will have 50 minutes for a presentation by Professor Leiner, and who will speak on the project research, encountering the suffering of the other. And I would like to show you the volume that has been published in 2023 and includes lots of material about the project and what we hopefully will hear in a short nutshell from Professor Leiner. Next, we will listen to Dr. Villanueva, who will present her initial project at Satoyama in Japan and its outcome for future work with groups on reconciliation. That will be for 30 minutes. Let's open with the first speaker, Professor Leiner, with whom the SISMO Center has long relations. He is the director and founder of the Jena Center for Reconciliation Studies and is the chair of Systematic Theology at the Friedrich-Schiller-University in Jena. To see his long list of accomplishment, please check his page on the university, and I will copy-paste it into the chat after I finish talking. So, Professor Leiner, please take the microphone and the camera.
Ada, thank you very much for this wonderful invitation and this opportunity to talk about our research project, which has also to do with this 3 monotheistic religions, which are important and which we met in several moments in this research project, encountering the suffering of the other, which we had the chance to conduct several years ago, and which I want to present the results now and also to revisit in the light, or rather in the darkness of the actual developments. So I would like to start a presentation now. Countering the suffering of the other, result of the research project with Israelis and Palestinians from 2013 to 2021. So we all saw actual photos and messages from Israel and Gaza, and we are shocked about what happened on the 7th of October. So many people died, kidnapped, and also victims of sexual violence and other kinds of violences from Hamas. And we also saw and see still pictures of Gaza with the bombing of a whole city first and then the next city, and with messages of thousands of Palestinians who died, civilians, children, and women. And this raises questions also for me as a scholar for reconciliation. First of all, how was it possible that this happened? Many people had the impression that the Middle East had become more peaceful than before, and then this attack happened. And why could it happen? It was not predicted by many analysts in the field. And the other thing is also, does this attacks from both sides not show that reconciliation is not possible, simply not possible between Israelis and Palestinians, that they cannot live together and there cannot be some rapprochement or something that they can find a way to peace. This is not showing that all the efforts in this sense have no chance to succeed. So this argument we hear now already, and it might come back by several parts in the discussions, and we might have to think about how we deal with this. And the third question, is there a way to peace in Israel and Palestine, and how could it be, and how much things must be done to get there? So these are the actual questions which are framing my presentation and which are be answered in the end. It's the fifth point of my presentation. But in the middle 3 points, I want to make a summary of some of the results of this experiment we could make with colleagues in Israel and Palestine. And for this, I want first to show you it's a concept of reconciliation and reconciliation studies as a theoretical background to understand what we are doing, because it's still a relatively new science, reconciliation studies. And then I present the fourth point, which is the longest on the encountering the suffering of the other project. So reconciliation translated now more or less officially, since there are also bigger projects in Japan on reconciliation studies with Wakai. What do we mean by reconciliation when we are studying it? There have been a lot of discussions on the definition, because reconciliation is something which happens deep in the hearts of persons, or which happens in peak moments where people are coming together and forgive each other. Is it something which needs a long process? Science mostly opted for the long process definition and the multifaceted concept of creating normal and, if possible, good relationships, or just better relationships between states, groups, organizations, and individuals reacting against past, present, or preventing even future grave incidents such as wars, civil wars, genocides, atrocities, forced displacement, enslavement, dictatorship, oppression, colonialism, apartheid, and other human rights violations and injustices. This is a definition we are working with. Why the normal and the good relationships is in quotation mark. we think that only the participants, so the people of the group in the conflict, can say our relationship is now normal again or good. It's not something we measure from outside, but we measure by asking the people, did it improve your relationship or not? And therefore we are quoting it. Normal does not mean that we give a normality, but normal would be like with somebody else where this grave incidents did not happen. This means normal. Because we consider all these human rights violations and this wars not as a normal thing, but as a pathology of social and political life. And yeah, we have different levels, states, groups, organizations, and individuals. And we also think that reconciliation is also preventive, and it's not just something after a peace agreement in a long-term process, but it's preventive and can be done in a way not to have grave incidents. We also aim at what is called in discussions deep reconciliation, a term I prefer to the term of thick reconciliation. This means also changing structural violence as poverty and exclusion. And it's about creating a culture free from hatred, negative stereotypes about the other groups, and about mutual and sustained respect. And a process which includes the establishment of mutual trust and cooperation, and it goes deeper into the confrontation with the violence and injustices inflicted by one group to another in the past, by organizing situation of personal encounters between victims and perpetrators, as well as through apologies, forgiveness, and reparations in the present. And it should lead to an orientation toward a common future which emerged from the process and also only can show up with the time. Why reconciliation studies? I make a short overview why we came in peace studies to go towards reconciliation. After World War II and Hiroshima, many people agreed that if humanity does not put an end to war, war probably will put an end to humanity. And we must find ways out. And there were different approaches. There were the classical peace and security approaches, which was more about weapon, power relationships, and diplomacy. And here we found some ways at least to think about threats, but we could only describe what is happening, and it was difficult to find solutions and ways to peace. We just said we could have less weapon, and this was achieved only to a certain extent. So we went towards conflict resolution and finding a lot of tools and ideas which are very important to resolve conflicts, to make compromises, to reframe the situations which led to conflict, to think about needs of the other side, and so on. And then there came another change with the discovery of intractable conflicts, where Israel and Palestine or Cyprus are typical examples that even if you find a conflict resolution, like the Oslo Agreement or the Annan plan we had for Cyprus to make a reunification of Cyprus, people vote against it, or they vote parties in who don't want to make the peace process. And therefore, especially a group of Israeli researchers around Daniel Bartal developed this concept that there is a social emotional infrastructure in the societies which leads to the fact that without tackling this, without overcoming this infrastructure in an intensive reconciliation process, we cannot resolve those problems, especially also if you have a democracy where people vote then for other parties. And then we have, at the same time, as reconciliation studies started with this book From Conflict Resolution to Reconciliation Studies by Tov was the editor, and Daniel Patal was one of the main authors. Then we went to the idea transitional justice can also be very important to overcome violence, but the results of the Balkan wars with Bosnia and Balkan was not so positive. They still live separated and want not live in a common state in majorities in Bosnia, for example. So this became strong arguments to think about reconciliation and to think about societies and to engage also civil society and religion for reconciliation processes. There were also a second pillar which led to reconciliation studies. This was in the 90s. We had reconciliation processes which were surprising many people that they were possible, and they avoided terrible wars and civil wars people had expected. South Africa came out of apartheid and made a democratic transition with the term of reconciliation. Northern Ireland, with the Good Friday Agreement, also overcame those situations. Rwanda, after the genocide, surprised the world that it was not a country which is practically done. Nobody can live there, and there will be revenge and hatred. But at least with a state-directed process called reconciliation, they overcame it. And people remembered also Germany's policy of reconciliation since the Second World War with France, Israel, Poland, as a precondition for reconciliation. And then reconciliation became part of many peace processes and peace treaties, such as in Colombia, which is a very detailed peace agreement, where also reconciliation measures play a role. Then we have a lot of questions, for example, reconciliation processes, how to start them. We see that it's often difficult to start them, even if important actors want them. You need both sides for it. You need a political will. You need some stable situation. You need media not to attack those processes, and all these things show that we need to think more about how to do it. Then they can be misused, of course. Even in Second World War, France under German occupation, the term of reconciliation with Germany was, as a Vichy regime, used, not very prominently, but it was used. Or Latin American dictatorships who stepped back from power, willing to get amnesty, they were also speaking about reconciliation. And then it could also be misunderstood as opposed to justice as a kind of normalization of injustices. These are discussions, people said in Palestine, we often met this attack, you are normalizers. Or it can be stuck and be reversed, like we said, Poland and Russia even had this cartoon reconciliation start, but it reversed. Or Burundi has also actually a lot of problems with this. It's a long-term project. Reconciliation which starts in the middle of violent conflict, or in some cases with attempt to prevent the violent conflict. This was a result we took from these experiences, and it has many different phases. We call something, this is in Jena, this is not, others don't use it, the Patmos moment, because we like a lot poet Friedrich-Schiller-University, and it has in its poem Patmos, he said, in the middle of danger, also this which rescues and saves is growing. And there are moments of transformation from violent phase to non-violent phase. Or then there are also ecosystem building periods where Dr. Villanueva will also talk more about it. often reconciliation only ends generations or even centuries later, because things will come back. Now to Hölderlin, German poet. These are two things we used as inspiration for reconciliation study in Jena. Reconciliation is in the middle of strife, and all things divided find each other again. So that reconciliation is not something which we are finding only after the end of the strife, but we must make peace with our enemies. So we must create better relationships already in the middle of strife and transform the conflict by attempts to reconciliation. And the Patmos moment is from the quote, German is in der Gefahr, wächst das Rettende auch. In danger, also what saves us is growing. So often in the darkest moments, we find also moments where people start to think about reconciliation, to come together for an alternative. So now the third point is reconciliation studies. This is the same definition, but only we say it's a scholarly description, interpretation, and evaluation of the process of creating normal and possible good relationships and so on. So this is a definition we propose. Then we think that reconciliation can be an overarching concept for many processes, because all those processes can be done without the goal of reconciliation, but they can also be done under the perspective of reconciliation. This would be good to have it. You can make political and legal provisions like peace treaties under the perspective that you want to win the next war. But you can also make a peace treaty that you want to reconcile and to get better relations and lasting peace. And so you need all these other things. Common security architecture, because security is a very basic need. Apologies, reparations, and so on. A lot of different measures, sharing narratives, humanizing the image of the others, and trauma therapies or truth and reconciliation commissions, and others can be framed as this in the process of getting better relationships. As we have so many practices, we need also many disciplines to understand reconciliation studies and reconciliation processes through arts, cultural anthropology, diplomacy, economy, education, history, law, media studies, philosophy, political science, psychology, regional studies, religious studies, theology, sociology, and many others can play a role in this. And it's a transdisciplinary research, which means we don't want to exchange the results at the border of the disciplines, but we want to follow a question through the disciplines, and we are related to the common good with our research. And those are characteristic also of the ESO experiment which we were doing, which was also based on the institutional development we had with since the 90s in reconciliation studies. Maybe just to mention, we have this project, Encountering the Suffering of the Other, was the first larger international project. And now we have also a big, huge reconciliation project in Japan at Waseda University. And we have also since several years International Association for Reconciliation Studies. So Jena's approach is also important for us. I called already the main points: transdisciplinarity, global comparative research, symbolic meaning of actions, and the Hölderlin perspective. And now I come to the project. It was 7 years, 2013, 2021, 3 countries, 4 universities: Jena, Tel Aviv, Ben Gurion University of the Negev in Beersheba, and Wasatiyah Institute at Al-Quds University. We had 5 disciplines: philosophy, political science, psychology, religious studies, and theology. We had 20 postdoctoral and doctoral researchers working in this project. We received more than 3 million euros from the German Research Foundation. The title was Hearts of Flesh, Not Stone, Encountering the Suffering of the Other. I had the honor to be the leader, and I was the burden to be the leader. You will also hear about this, of this project. And there were project leaders in the different universities. My partner in Tel Aviv was social psychologist Ari Nadler. In Ben Gurion University, it was also the psychologist and educational specialist Tifla Sagi, and the political scientist and head of American Studies Mohammed Ashani was in Al-Quds University, our partner. So what did we do during the project? The central field were experiments where we went with groups of Israelis and Palestinians encountering the suffering of the other group. This means we took 30 Palestinians, mixed in age, religion, region, and also gender, who traveled, the first travel 2014 to Krakow and Auschwitz. And then we made 2 travels to Berlin, Jena, and Buchenwald 2017 and 2018. With these large groups, and they were prepared by workshops, and then we had those travels. The first travel was a mixed travel, or with Israelis. The second and the third was not a mixed travel, and we had to change a bit the concept. I'll tell you soon why. Then we had in Israel, we had these 2 one-year-long classes for Israeli students, 2013 and 14, and 14 and 15, as a social psychological experiment at Ben Gurion University, where they reflect on Palestinian experiences of suffering, meet Palestinians, and travel to places of their suffering. Historical places like cities where they lived, but also they visited a refugee camp close to Jerusalem. And then we had also one visit with a kind of control group from South Africa to Jena and Buchenwald to see also their reactions. All this was framed and accompanied by laboratory experiments in social psychology with travel-related topics such as victimhood, in Tel Aviv, respect to Vietnam. And then we had PhDs, master studies, and postdoctoral researches in topics such as biographical approaches to peacemaking, gender aspects in reconciliation, ethnography, the kind of ethnography of social media, resources and scripts for reconciliation in Judaism and Islam, so also religious studies, where in it, here I'll show you some pictures. So,
wait a second, we have a little problem with the battery.
okay.
Yeah, now it works. Please go.
Thank you. So we had, this is a picture of Palestinians taking part in the trip to Berlin and Buchenwald. And here they are in Berlin. This is the walls of both sides, and they are, as you see, quite happy to see walls which can fall. There was also a topic, and there were some, where they are now, previously were the minefields where people died when they wanted to cross over. So, and here they are in Buchenwald concentration camp. This is the entrance of the concentration camp, the Palestinian group. And this is one of the preparatory workshops in Bethlehem took place. So we had 3 hypotheses which were more important for the project than the small hypothesis for the doctoral projects. One was encountering the suffering of the other ESO can effectively overcome the widespread denial or marginalization of a group considered as enemies. So the denial of the suffering of Jews in the Holocaust is often widespread in Palestinian society and similar in Israeli society. The Nakba, the displacement of the Palestinian, the violence around it is often also marginalized in Israeli education. Second point, encountering the suffering of the other can generate empathy, and by and through empathy, willingness to reconcile. So encountering the suffering of the other lead to empathy and lead to willingness to reconcile. This was our second hypothesis. And the third hypothesis was there are context factors, such as the actual political situation, framing of the ESO experience or reframing, recognition and respectful communication, individual experiences, religious beliefs and identities, which play an important role in encountering the suffering of the other. So this was our third hypothesis. And this third hypothesis, we had the three hypotheses we had to test. What were the results? The first hypothesis, so that the denial or marginalization of the suffering of the other groups, out group, as we call it, the social psychological language, could be confirmed. Going to those places convinced people that this all happened and changed the view, both groups, for the Israeli group as for the Palestinian groups. For the Palestinian groups, the role of the Germans was especially important because they said the Germans have no interest to talk about the Holocaust that's really happening. So we believe in that they are telling the truth with these places. And we found out that the best for this group was to treat them as people who want to find out by themselves. We say, we are like researchers, we are in a scientific setting, and you can ask every question. You can say, why is this oven constructed like this? It sounds like it was built later, or such things. And we found answers, or we had them because we knew, or we found people to find out why it has been. And sometimes we found out, something had been rebuilt later, or things like this. And this created a good atmosphere and a kind of willingness to learn more. They bought books afterwards about the history of the Second World War, of Holocaust, and so on. And the places gained a personal significance. There were also Palestinians who went with their friends to concentration camps in Sachsenhausen for the next holiday, for example. And this is in the spirit to learn that it's happened and to have compassion with the victims. And they shared all the experience. There's a whole small book in Palestine where those of our groups who wanted to speak out and says we have to tell the society what really happened, and they should let drop this wrong denial of the Holocaust, which made them appear as uneducated, stupid people. So they published. So this was very beautifully confirmed. The second hypothesis was only partly confirmed, because it's true that the encountering of the suffering of the other led to increased empathy, but not to a significant increased willingness to reconcile. This means there was empathy. If you look more exactly in the results, it was increased by some of the people who are sensitive for this, much more than in others. Part this in both experiments, it was like that, also the Israelis. And but why there was not more willingness to reconcile, and the reason is they answered often, we have no hope. There is no political partner to reconcile with on the other side. Interestingly, also on both sides, that we have no partner who want to reconcile in the political sphere. We need different leadership. We need not extremist ruling. We need a completely changed political situation. And from people to people, reconciliation could be possible, or better relationships, but not in the political sphere. And the third hypothesis, so the context factors play a huge role. This was also very strongly confirmed and even enriched over our hypothesis that we had made. So the context factors were strongly confirmed even beyond the planned experiments. And we had also discovered a strong additional factor which changed reconciliation theory, so loyalty with one's own group. Because they all have loyalty with one's own group, and if they go too far towards reconciliation, they feel somehow a traitor, or they feel bad, illoyal to their societies. This led to just stay here, because this loyalty led to activities such as when a Palestinian group went to Buchenwald, they took out a Palestinian flag and were dancing with the flag. And we thought, what is happening now? Are they celebrating something against Jewish or something? And they said, no, it's we want to reaffirm that we are not traitors, the Palestinians going there. This was an interesting effect. And then they could also talk about willingness to reconcile. Other factors also individual, which were very important to see, were individual religious identities. We had two participants in those experiments who had lived losses of their family. Palestinians, family members had been killed. And one, for example, had said, I committed already, and I used to become a suicide bomber. And then, but she talked before, because she had doubts, to an imam, and this imam said, this is a great sin to do this. You should not kill normal people in a shopping mall or something like this. They send you wherever they want. If you want to take revenge, then live a happy life, have a family, have children. And the other was also a sister of a Palestinian who has been, her brother has been killed by a kind of revenge killing of a settler. And she also became very religious and said, no revenge, this is against the husband. So there was a lot of such factors found, and also we had here, instead of willingness to reconcile, found a tragedy-sensitive truthfulness. For example, in the Israeli research, that they said, we want to know what is true, and it's a tragical situation. We need Israel to be protected, the state of Israel to live in, but we have on the other side, we live on the land of the Palestinians, and we have there are many injustices and they must be somehow healed, but many cannot be changed anymore. Or we had this empowerment to human and sensitive communication with the former enemies that says that, yeah, we understand your pain, we understand how you feel, and we are not talking with you with stereotypes like this now a lot in the conflict. Politicians, even both sides call the others Nazis and all these things. So this was a very much more understanding language that people has done. And I think these two concepts of tragedy sensitive truthfulness and empowerment to human and sensitive communication shows us a bit steps towards reconciliation before apologies, forgiveness, reparation, conflict. Yeah. The third hypothesis was also confirmed in an unexpected way, because when we were in Auschwitz, we had a journalist. This journalist said he will publish 3 weeks after this in an American educational journal with something about our travel. So we accepted it. If he respects anonymous and other to be the participants to be anonymous, no photos and so on. But what he did was to publish this in Haaretz in the moment when we were still in Auschwitz. So you can imagine this was already a very big reaction. And what was much worse, that Al-Quds News in their online version published a so-called translation of it and claimed that it was 2 Zionist organizations funding this trip. So they wanted really to attack the Palestinian professor who had maybe not acted with the permission of some Palestinian power relationships he should have asked. I don't know what happened really. Yeah, so this led, of course, to calls from home. What are you doing? Why did you take part in this trip? Come back as soon as possible, and so on. And when we asked in questionnaires, we had even a decreased willingness to reconcile. And some months later, the car was torched of this professor in Al-Quds University for the Pajani, and he had to stay abroad, secure. So here's a photo of the Palestinians having a moment of memory for Palestinian victims before they speak about their experience in Buchenwald. And then we have what is this loyalty factor, how we translated it into thinking now human being in 6 dimension of relationships with oneself, with enemies, with their own group, with transcendence, with nature, the third party, and they're all in this web we are living. And reconciliation must be always thought in this, how we move in this web. Now, 5 minutes for the actual questions. How was it possible that the recent escalation of violence in Israel and Gaza happened? When we made our trip to Auschwitz, we had also one member, participant who was Hamas member, and he said he has seen everything, but he still believes that it was exaggerated, the Holocaust, that it was just an action in the war, and it's more propaganda made up by Israel, and he had not the feeling that anything should change. He was very strong in his third view. And so what we find in the small mirror of this experiment with one person at least, that there is a power of propaganda very strong in the Palestinian society, and this leads to people who are just thinking like Hamas thinks. But we have it also, we know also in Israel, we have this propaganda of extremists who got a lot of power, especially the younger generation votes more than the elder generations for right-wing parties and the actual government. has also politicians who have more this big agenda. So we have on both sides this agenda from the river to the sea, the whole country only for us. And they are now very strong. And they seem to win now, and it's their time to play out the power they have. And this could happen, and nobody paid attention to it because those social, emotional developments, which slowly increased and happened more and more, they are not so much considered by specialists of peace and war studies. They look more at weapons and treaties and such things, but not in the social evolution which happened. In the project, we also had a much easier time in the beginning than in the end. In the beginning, we went with Israelis and Palestinians to Auschwitz. In the end, it was even difficult to have a meeting in a place between Israel and Palestine, between the groups. So the second question, does the Hamas attack and the bombing of Gaza show that reconciliation is not possible between Israelis and Palestinians? I would say no, because I hear still from our partners and others in both societies that they want peace and reconciliation. Also in Gaza, we had in another project, we built a reconciliation studies project in a university in Gaza related not to Hamas but to Fatah. And the professors discovered reconciliation when already studying in the UK, they had discovered it. And they said, yes, this is the way we should go. And they still, after all this, say we want to continue when our universities rebuilt because it was destroyed by bombs, to do this project. The extremists on both sides have had their momentum now, but I think they will also, and they increasingly experience their limits. And this, I think it's a chance. They cannot go to the end. Hamas, where will they go now? They had also a lot of support by people who said, yeah, they are the ones who fight for the Palestinian cause, but now they will also have to face a lot of people who will be killed in the war by Israel, and they have also the very clear label that they are terrorists and they are somehow out of the political sphere. So they are also somehow stuck in the situation because winning against Israel is not possible for this small group. So what will happen? But also Israel needs ammunition and weapons from the US and others, and they say, no, stop, we don't want Gaza to become part of Israel and the Palestinians forcibly displaced. So they feel now that there must be another solution, and I hope this feeling will be deep, and that they will, both sides, they will lose a lot of credit in the societies, and with a new government in Israel and with Hamas being marginalized from the political sphere. So there could be a peaceful development, and there could be a Patmos moment that now hope for peace can grow and a new approach can get momentum. So I'm really hopeful that there is a real chance, not today, but in some months it could become stronger and stronger. But we need also a way to get there and to strengthen the peace and reconciliation voices and movement, which in both societies are not very well organized and not very strong at the moment. They have been much stronger in Israel years ago. So a third question was the way to the peace in Israel and Palestine. So what I can say from our experiments, so those things we found, overcoming propaganda to tragedy-sensitive truthfulness, so that we just look at the truth, what happened, and not just say we to say this and this is our view and both sides fight just wars and everything is justified what they did in those fightings, should be replaced by thinking which want to find out the truth, and they want also by thinking which would become more human, to see the human side, which still people talk about it. Even fathers of victims say in Israel that they don't want children in Gaza to die, and such things should become much more important in the consideration for also the future. And I think we should also build networks and ecosystems for peace so that they become a stronger social force which support each other, which have links to media, which has links to international actors. They should accept that Palestinians have to live with the reality of Israel. If you talked more with Palestinians, many thought that it's like this, that it's not realistic to get rid of Israel. But also Israel will have not more security than by a stable and sustainable peace. So thank you very much. I have here my email. If you have questions to this experiment, I'm so grateful to have been part of. And here's also this book, which is also in your library here from today on. And we have, so many other things also worked in this project on reconciliation, Judaism, and so many things inside. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I must say that your talk gives a little bit of optimism for people who are really worried whether there is any possibility at the moment for any way of reconciliation. It seems so scary, so that your talk really gives a little bit of optimism that there are people there who really wish to have some kind of peaceful living instead of creating war and buying more ammunition and so on. So that was for me very important to hear. Please, if there are any from the people here. And so we will have enough time to continue with the second speaker. So Professor Leiner, thank you very much. And we hope to be a little bit more optimistic. And I will move to the second part of our seminar, the lecture by Dr. Laura Villanueva, and she's the director of Satoyama for Peace Institute and special postdoctoral researcher and director of practice at the Jena Center for Reconciliation Studies. For her achievements and studies, please see the page on her university. I placed it before on the internet, on the chat, sorry. So please look over there. And Dr. Villanueva, please offer us a different look at some of your projects. Thank you very much.
So, thank you. I'd like to extend, first of all, Dr. Cohen, the Graduate School of Theology, and Doshisha University for their kind invitation. I also want to send my greetings to everybody who's connected from the SysMore network. So today I'm going to share about Satoyama for Peace, Ecosystems for Peace and Reconciliation. So this is the Jena Center for Reconciliation Studies structure. The Satoyama for Peace is housed inside of the Jena Center Reconciliation Center. And my presentation will delve further into ecosystems, and ecosystems are the fifth pillar of the JCRS framework. As Professor Cohen introduced, my name is Dr. Villanueva. I am the founder and director of Satoyama for Peace, Ecosystems for Peace and Reconciliation, and I will speak first of the emergence of Satoyama for Peace, and specifically after that about the first Colombian religious ecosystem for peace and reconciliation that comes out of this Satoyama for Peace work. And then I will conclude my presentation with a video message by the first Colombian religious ecosystem for peace and reconciliation that's directed to all of you, to Professor Dr. Cohen, the graduate school, SISMOR, and to Doshisha, and to all those connected today. Thank you very much for this space and this invitation. So Satoyama for Peace, I'm the founder and director. Professor Leiner, who is here with us and just provided us this excellent lecture, is the scientific director. And as the title implies, the Satoyama for Peace comes from the Japanese Satoyama. I am speaking about this concept through the understanding of the Satoyama in Japan. So taking this concept of Satoyama for Peace, what do we do at the JCRS at Satoyama for Peace? Our mission is to unite diverse ecosystems for peace and reconciliation. We understand that inside of Satoyama, you have an ecosystem that supports peace and reconciliation. So we want to unite diverse ecosystems around the world that will be able to connect them, and they will be able to foster collaboration among various stakeholders, including academia, government, NGOs, public and private sectors, religious communities, environmental stewards, and diverse human networks. And what our aim is to create a new field of study that's going to harness the power of ecosystems that are at the intersection of peace and reconciliation, science, policy, and practice. So this approach, we understand through this mission, is essential for sustainable and holistic progress towards a more peaceful and equitable world, and that is our mission. So what is the research we're going to do for the center? We're going to do high impact research, which means that we're going to center on the ecosystem turn in peace building, conflict transformation, and reconciliation studies. This is what is understood that has emerged from the space of Satoyama thinking of peace and reconciliation. There's an ecosystem turn taking place. We're now going to move from that local turn in peace building to another turn, which is ecosystem turn in peace and reconciliation. And the goal is now to reassess peace, conflict, and reconciliation concepts, analyzing diverse ecosystems around the globe. So we're going to now start looking at all these different Satoyama-like ecosystems around the globe. And doing so, we'll be able to establish a firm foundation for the philosophical, theoretical, and practical principles that support these ecosystems. And from the processes, practices, and metrics, from that what will emerge from these ecosystems is a new understanding of how do you sustain peace and how do you sustain reconciliation. And lastly, what would our collaborative impact be? We focus on dialogue, scientific research, joint academic and non-academic actor collaboration from an ecosystems approach, and that is, I think, key here. And we would have three initial understandings of what that impact would be: quality research on the potential of the Satoyama for its contributions to an understanding of peace and reconciliation systems and ecosystems. Second, ensuring the sustainability of diverse Satoyama-like ecosystems, because the initial understanding is also that the Satoyama in Japan, there's also a lot of Satoyamas around the world, Satoyama-like ecosystems that also harbor inside of them spaces of ways of being and ways of doing, of sustainable lifestyles, of sustainability, of understandings of peacefulness, but also of tools inside of the Satoyamas that have tools in order to build peace, to maintain reconciliation through tools such as tradition and culture and other specific points that are unique to the Satoyama. And third, facilitating ecosystems, exchanges of experiences and tools for peace and reconciliation. That means facilitating these exchanges not only in a geographically close region, but in different spaces around the world. So what would happen now if we started to think about these Satoyamas around the world, Satoyama-like systems, exchanging with each other, for example, in Africa with Japan, or in Japan with Germany, in Germany with Colombia, and when they're all connected, what are these new tools and understandings that we're going to understand that will contribute to peace and reconciliation as part of the collaborative impact that we strive to have in this new pillar, in this new Satoyama for Peace pillar inside of the JCRS that was established in 2023. So now, briefly, where does Satoyama for Peace emerge? So when you first look at these three beautiful spaces in nature, these beautiful landscapes, it would be easy to imagine that they're all in the same country. Yet what we're looking at in the first landscape is a village in Japan. And the two other landscapes are landscapes in Colombia. Yet they're all Satoyamas, except that the original Satoyama as the concept and space is in Japan, in Kosuga village on the top, the far top right. And then the next two landscapes, Satoyama-like landscapes, are in two different places in Colombia. And yet all of these landscapes share very similar attributes when we're thinking not only of geography, but we're thinking also about understandings of peacefulness, of reconciliation, of tools that they all share. If I went today to the village in Japan and then to the village in Colombia, I might find out that they think about tradition or think about culture or our living culture, our living tradition, or are using them to succeed from generation to generation. And inside of these different characteristics of the Satoyama or Satoyama-like landscapes, we find tools that allow people to succeed generation to generation in peacefulness and in reconciliation, and to be able, most important, to sustain these conditions. So briefly, in terms of the work in Japan. So for the past 16 years, a village in Japan has been opening its doors, welcoming women, Israelis and Palestinian women who came to this space. They came to this space not only to learn about the life of the Satoyama and the life of villagers in their way of living a sustainable lifestyle, of living in a sustainable way and in harmony with nature and harmony between humans and humans and nature, but they also came to have this encounter. Now, this has been facilitated by a Japanese organization that I'm a part of. I've been doing that for 16 years. And in those 16 years, as we understood that individuals can come together in a place like Japan, in a very small village with 648 individuals in the Satoyama area, when we understood that they can come together and have transformative experiences as individuals and as a group that straddled both personal change, also change that included others in the space, but also with nature. Through those 16 years, I'm also a peace builder who has been working in other places in the world, and Colombia, during the same time that I'm engaged with Japan and this village and this Japanese organization and these individuals coming from the Middle East, I'm also in Colombia, and I start to understand that they're very similar in terms of their Satoyama-like landscapes, but I also start to ask the question, what does this mean for peace and reconciliation, not only here in this village in Japan, in other spaces in Japan, but what does that mean in other spaces in the world that also have similar attributes? And from the 16 years in this village called Kosuga village, what we understood we were doing, and I coined it off in 2012 because we're all very busy doing this every year, and welcoming women and the villagers are opening their hearts, their knowledge, and they are really the master and the master teachers. What happens at this time is that I understand we're doing Satoyama for peace. We're using the Satoyama as a means of having this practical peace building and reconciliation model through the use of the Satoyama. So I coined that Satoyama for peace now. But the next question, now working in Colombia, ecosystems. What does this ecosystem of the Satoyama tell us about ecosystems around the world and about, in general, peace and reconciliation? And that's the point where I moved from thinking, engaging not only in Japan, but my engagement in Colombia that begins in 2016. So in Japan, it's 16 years. It's 16 years. In Colombia, it's an 8-year engagement, almost a 9-year engagement. So it's an overlap. So that also allowed for an understanding of what this means when two spaces are now so similar in so many points that it's necessary to now start thinking of ecosystems for peace and reconciliation. So Satoyama-like ecosystems around the world, but thinking about an approach like Satoyama for peace, but in ecosystems for peace and reconciliation. And that's now where I'm going to move towards in terms of my presentation, because I like to share how this very quiet 16-year process in a very small village that really the heart and minds of the villagers were able to share this deep knowledge of life and of being and of doing, how that all transferred into then thinking of a larger space and other ecosystems around the world. And now I'm going to move to Colombia. So what you're going to see in terms of Colombia is a direct result of this experience. But in order to just very quickly share how the ideas were developed, so I already shared a bit about Satoyama for peace. So the next idea, because moving from practice to scholarship, was peace and reconciliation require an understanding of the potential of the ecosystem to sustain these efforts. So it was important to think of ecosystem perspectives. The third idea was ecosystem research for peace and reconciliation. It's going to provide the initial philosophical, theoretical, and practical underpinnings of such ecosystems, because there's still a lot of research to be done, because for a large part of this experience, there's been a lot of practical work done, some research on my part since 2014, but now this has to expand into a really deep search, because the Satoyama itself has a lot yet to be understood in terms of what it contains for peace and reconciliation. And then the fourth idea, the ecosystem turning peace building, conflict transformation, and reconciliation studies. Now, what I mean by this is that until now we went from an understanding of the paradigm was that the local turn in peace building. And we focused for a long time in speaking about the local and thinking about the local and structuring our interventions and from different parts of the world, trying to fuse the bottom up and top to bottom ways of engaging in peace and reconciliation. But from the Satoyama, I understood that what's taken place now is this shift towards thinking about an ecosystem turn, instead of just considering what this local space does in one geographic given space. It's now thinking about what this ecosystem in its entirety has to do also with the next ecosystem or even across the world, and how this turn might give us another understanding, a paradigm shift, so that we're able to now think about the world we're in at the moment, especially with everything that's taken place, and start to think about our present challenges and also possibilities from an ecosystem perspective. So what's the vision? The vision that this takes us to is that Satoyama-like ecosystems can serve as a functional global mechanism for promoting peace and reconciliation, thereby facilitating the creation of a new international peace and reconciliation architecture. So that from the Satoyama for peace, the vision is that it's these Satoyama-like ecosystems around the world, once they're all connected, they're going to build a type of international peace and reconciliation architecture that truly allows also something else that's really important in order to sorry, I lost the word I wanted to use specifically, but in order to make the peace building and reconciliation work, to be able to make this a horizontal to make this a horizontal activity where you're going to be able to have in international interventions, instead of having top to bottom interventions coming in different parts of the world, you're going to be able to have the Satoyamas share across the system their own peace building and reconciliation strategies, and then really make this in another type of system that's able to move us away from this paradigm that we still have of top to bottom type of peace building or interventions. I'm sorry for that. There's a word that I will come back to, which is quite important. So now in general, so what have we done in 2023 for ecosystems for peace and reconciliation? So these are some of the activities from the center, again, all emerging from this experience in the Satoyama. So we have been trying now, as I had mentioned, it's important that the ecosystems around the world are able to meet and to exchange. And we've been trying to do that with the original village in Yamanashi and with the village in Colombia. And we have been trying to do this for a couple of years. Specifically, again, we had COVID, we had to, as everybody did around the world, take a pause, and now we're trying again to do this, and we're only still having the difficulties which are common to everyone, which is funding. But the idea is that they come from Colombia to the Japanese village, that they're able to have this time and this exchange, and from there take on the next step. So in 2023, we have also been engaging with a specific ecosystem of the municipality of Granada in Colombia. Now, the municipality of Granada in Colombia was one of the hardest hit places by the armed conflict. The armed conflict in Colombia lasted 60 years. And then there was a peace agreement in 2016, after 60 years of armed conflict. Now, this is one of the hardest hit municipalities in Colombia, and we have now started to sign memorandums of understanding to work together with 4 different pioneering spaces in the municipality of Granada. Asovida, which in the worst of the conflict, like the Holterland perspective, where the Jena Center for Reconciliation Studies works. In the worst of the conflict, Asovida in 2007 was already working in the midst of the conflict. They were already doing reconciliation in the middle of conflict. So Asovida, they're the pioneering organization that built the first hall of Never Again inside of Colombia. The next space is Sports for Peace. And we're also, they do Sports for Peace in order to work conflict resolution and peace building in their space. They also started in 2009, Association of Caminantes, which is the Walkers for Reconciliation. They bring demobilized together and start working together. Then we have also the idea, and now working towards the idea of having then a particular space inside of Granada also sign off into being part of this ecosystems for peace and reconciliation. So now we're starting to map out this Satoyama-like space, which you also saw in one of the pictures, with each of the organizations that were key during the worst of the conflict and even after the peace agreement, and how they have been working towards peace and reconciliation and how they are sustaining it. So in 2023, work with Japan, work with Colombia. Actually, this week we will be signing, not this week, next week, signing the next memorandum with the next place where we're going to be working with an ecosystem in Rwanda. And that's why we have here 2024 Japan. And as we move forward and we complete next year, we'll have a better idea how we're slowly moving towards other ecosystems around the world. So now, briefly, the religious ecosystem for peace and reconciliation. Now, there are all types of Satoyama-like spaces around the world, and there's all types of ecosystems and also specific ecosystems inside of ecosystems. So in this case, we came to work with the religious ecosystem, which we denote as the first one, because it is the first one that we've done with Satoyama for Peace. We came to do this by the academic and government nexus. One of the things that we do in Satoyama for Peace, as our mission states, we want to bring all types of actors together. I know. We also want to bring academic and government actors together. And in doing that, we brought the Jena Center for Reconciliation Studies, Satoyama for Peace, and the government of Antioquia together. And we signed a memorandum. So we're going to be working with the government of Antioquia for the next 3 years with local communities to strengthen their memory and reconciliation processes in Antioquia. So this is it's not really focused on the religious sector, but from this first academic and government nexus, where we would sign with the government of Antioquia, we would also be assigned to be the academic lead for next year's International Summit on Nonviolence. And now it's in this moment when we're now engaged with the government that they request that we think of the religious sector of Antioquia, that we do a type of diploma course for religious freedom as a human right, and that the group would be members of the religious sector in Colombia, the Department of Antioquia. Now, as we are given this request to do this inside of Satoyama for Peace Ecosystems for Peace and Reconciliation, we have to think about how we're going to move forward, because we're just building out this new pillar, but also for the Department of Antioquia, as Professor Leiner and myself were invited to Colombia to be part of this summit. Professor Leiner is a theologian by training, and I'm a peace builder by training. And between these two spaces and these two sets of knowledge and experiences, we agreed. And we agreed because we thought that it was very important once I briefly share about the religious sector in Colombia, which I believe will be very interesting for everybody connected, given what it means for the strength of religious actors. So the Department of Antioquia, it's one of the 32 departments of Colombia. It's located on the central northwestern part, which is the green state up to your upper left. Now, it was one of the hardest hit departments, meaning state, but during the armed conflict. And Priest Francisco de Rue has also stated that if there's no peace there's no peace in Colombia if there's no peace in this one state. So that's really the marker of how peace is going to be sustained. It's not about the building, but also about the sustaining of the peace. And in terms of the religious sector, so in Antioquia, even though it was the hardest hit by the conflict, it's also one of the spaces where there was a genesis of diverse forms of resistance by civil society and by institutions. And they have done that in many different forms. And over the past 2 years, going to the religious sector, the past 2 years, the Secretariat for Institutional Affairs of Peace and Nonviolence in the governor's office in Antioquia, they have collaborated with the Departmental Committee on Religious Affairs and Worship, and they carried out a characterization of the religious sector. And when they did this, they established first a interreligious affairs committee. They created the first directory grouping the different religious denominations, and they actually looked at the SDGs, and they found that the SDGs, the religious sector was impacting the SDGs to such a degree that they needed to actually make them and recognize them as peace agents. They went on to create public policy on religious freedom, specifically for these religious actors, and now they're understood as very important to the implementation of the peace agreement in Colombia. And that's how we formed Peace Partners. Peace Partners came from the idea of bringing our diverse knowledges, Professor Leiner and myself, and creating a space inside of Satoyama for Peace, where we created a diploma for religious freedom as human rights and the role of religion. and reconciliation processes. It is the first religious ecosystems for peace and reconciliation. And what we do in this diploma is that we train leaders with knowledge, space for reflection, and networks to support their responsibilities as religious leaders and peace agents. And this diploma is presented by Partners for Peace, which is Satoyama for Peace and the Jena Center for Reconciliation Studies. So briefly, we began the diploma in November, we end in June. We have 4 hours of courses every month with content of different experts around the world. And at the end of the diploma, what we're going to do with these religious leaders is that we're going to sign the first virtual Peace Charter for Forgiveness and Reconciliation and the Religious Ecosystems for Peace and Reconciliation Memorandum of Understanding. So it's going to be also another historic moment for this particular ecosystem. The last point about this diploma and this space in Antioquia and this religious sector is that we had 199 religious leaders sign up for this training. So we actually had to stop the registration because there were so many leaders that wanted to attend the training because there had never been a training offered to religious leaders. We have religious leaders in a lot of rural areas. This is not just religious leaders in cities. So this really became really an unexpected turn of events because we expected 40 and we ended up with stopping a registration at 200. So finally, this is a message that is sent from the religious leaders, specifically the Religious Ecosystem for Peace and Reconciliation in Satoyama for Peace, the religious diploma, the religious focus diploma I just presented, and they wanted to send a message to all of you here in Doshisha, to Professor Dr. Cohen, to the faculty, the graduate faculty of theology, and to Sis Moore. And I am now just exiting this in order to be able to play the video.
Buen día, soy Walter Vargas, líder de la comunidad Centro de Fe y Esperanza en el municipio de Santuario, en el departamento de Antioquia. Para nosotros como organización basada en la fe y que nos encontramos en una área de conflicto armado, hacer parte de este diplomado y hacer parte de ecosistemas para la paz y la reconciliación es de suma importancia, pues eso nos brinda herramientas para seguir desarrollando nuestro trabajo como gestores de paz. Una labor que venimos desarrollando por más de 20 años con el programa Constructores de Paz. Y esto lo hemos venido desarrollando también en diferentes instituciones educativas. Nuestra inmensa gratitud y reconocimiento al Centro de Estudios para la Reconciliación Jena, a la Gobernación de Antioquia y a todas las personas que hacen posible este diplomado. Para todos ustedes, muchas gracias y bendiciones.
Dios los bendiga, un saludo cordial. Mi nombre es Nelson Hernández, desde aquí de Segovia, Antioquia, Colombia. Un saludo grande para todo el equipo de trabajo de ecosistemas para la paz y la reconciliación. Gracias por esta labor que vienen realizando. Para todos los amigos, hermanos en Japón, un abrazo muy grande. Oramos que Dios bendiga siempre al Japón. Un abrazo grande para todos.
Agradecidos con la Universidad de Jena y Satoyama por la paz, que nos capacita para todo lo que tiene que ver con la paz y la reconciliación. En nuestra Constitución Política de Colombia, la paz es un derecho de todos los colombianos. Como entidad religiosa estamos trabajando duro para ello. Estamos asesorando familias para que sean funcionales, haciendo campamentos de jóvenes para rescatarlos del flagelo de la droga. Y estamos creando una cultura de paz, concientizando a las personas acerca del amor, el perdón, la reconciliación y la paz. Para que haya paz debe haber perdón. El perdón es el arma que desarma el corazón violento y resentido. Y así estamos trabajando para alcanzar la verdadera paz duradera.
Hola, soy Mariluz Ospina Córdoba, misionera de la Cruzada Estudiantil y Profesional de Colombia en Itagüí. Pertenecemos al ecosistema para la paz y la reconciliación. También hacemos parte de la mesa interreligiosa en Itagüí. somos agentes de paz, trabajando en la restauración tanto del individuo como de la sociedad, ya que hemos entendido que de nada vale cambiar las estructuras si no se cambia el ser.
Hola, soy Joana Rodríguez de la Casa Amor y Poder en Itagüí. Brindamos asesoría espiritual, acompañamiento psicológico y de proyecto de vida, tanto personal como colectivo. Pertenecemos al ecosistema de paz y reconciliación. Hacemos parte como miembros activos de la Mesa Interreligiosa de Itagüí, pionera en nuestro país, donde velamos por la libertad religiosa. Este diplomado nos ha permitido ampliar el panorama del impacto que tenemos como comunidades y nos motiva a seguir trabajando juntos.
Somos Iglesia Cristiana New Life, lugar de adoración en Copacabana. Y como entidad religiosa, nuestra voz tiene un papel vital porque buscamos garantizar una vida sana desde diferentes aspectos, promoviendo el bienestar en todas las edades y en los diferentes grupos poblacionales de nuestro país. Teniendo en cuenta el llamado a la acción global de los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible de la ONU, los cuales buscan garantizar que todas las personas disfruten de paz, y gracias a la incansable gestión de la Gobernación de Antioquia, la Universidad de Jena y Satoyama por la Paz en Alemania, el ser protagonistas del primer ecosistema para la paz y la reconciliación significa un compromiso mayor con nuestra comunidad y la misión que tenemos como entidad de impactar vidas promulgando la verdadera paz.
Les saluda Alba Ospina de la Iglesia Gozo Santo en la Estrella. Contribuimos a la paz desde la enseñanza y práctica de las Sagradas Escrituras, acompañamiento espiritual y apoyo psicosocial, encontrando en la comunión con Dios el sentido y propósito de vida. Alcanzamos la paz al disminuir el ego y fomentar la unidad. De allí la importancia de participar en ecosistemas para la paz y la reconciliación. Bendiciones.
Dios me bendiga a todos ricamente. Soy el pastor Apolinar Torres Montes y estoy en compañía del pastor Gilberto Arguello y Eladio Rodríguez. Queremos bendecir la vida de todos, cada uno de ustedes, ahí en los diferentes lugares donde residen. Un saludo especial y fraterno para la doctora Laura, que se ha ocupado de nosotros con esta gran capacitación de este diplomado, que es de gran bendición. Sé que ha sido de gran bendición para todos nosotros y para muchas personas. Entonces, nosotros somos la corporación, somos parte de una gran corporación denominada la Corporación de Pastores Vida y Paz, aquí en el municipio de Zaragoza, Antioquia, y estamos enfocados en la paz y la reconciliación.
Somos la Comunidad Cristiana Amor y Poder, constituida legalmente con personería jurídica con resolución 4247 del 8 de septiembre de 2010. Casa Amor y Poder, como la llamamos los miembros, por ser un espacio de integración, amor y apoyo mutuo.
Very much for listening to that message. I hope that you felt the warmth and the joy they had. They all sent in their videos, hoping to reach all of you. And also the government of Colombia, they sent their messages to Doshisha as well. They say that in the government of Antioquia, we know that the importance of working with different peace actors for peace and reconciliation is important. They thank peace partner Satoyama for Peace and the University of Jena for their commitment and dedication for the formation of religious leaders from religious entities in Antioquia. Now, this video was made by the government and specifically for Doshisha. So I hope that you felt those greetings and received them as they sent them. And lastly, thank you so much for your time today. Ecosystems for Peace and Reconciliation are custodians of a future where ecosystems foster equity, nurture dialogue, and champion peaceful coexistence. So please join us so that we can cultivate a world where ecosystems are at the interface of peace and reconciliation, science and policy. And they don't just exist, but they thrive for peace. Thank you very much for your patience, especially with all the technical situations that I'm sure were on my end. So thank you very much, and thank you very much, Professor Dr. Khan.
Thank you very much. And please look at the next activity of SISMORE. Thank you very much for today. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.